All right. So now that I have this sort of cleaned up a little bit, well, let's go trim dynamic through here now. And I'm going to finish demoing this one area, and then I'll move on to the ship, and let's see how we're going to tackle that, because it's going to take me forever and a day to model that out in Maya. I can ZBrush, I can use some of ZBrush's tricks for modeling it out, especially with the Z modeler. So I'm going to build out those boxing gloves, I guess you can call them, inside of ZBrush. While I'm doing this, I'm really trying to isolate regions too. I want this top part of the head with the eyes poking through to feel very separate from the lower portion where the jaws are here, and I have lines leading you into those areas, right? Creating those deep shadows. Let's move down to the bottom now. Let's get a separation between the soft body tissue and the rigid tissue, or the shell. And any little splice like this, anytime I do something like that with the snake hook, I'll have to go in and ZRemesh, because that needs to exist in the silhouette. You can't get this going into a normal map. It just doesn't play nicely. It doesn't read nicely. A little bit of silhouette shaping there. Now let's go into some of the soft tissue and elaborate on that. Actually, before I do that, let's do a little trim dynamic work up here a little bit more. I'm really trying to make sure that as I'm sculpting this, that I have some graceful moments in here. Just the lines flowing into one another. There's a language that's starting to be spoken in here that sort of transcends, oh, this is a crab shell, or this is from a shellfish, or this is from a mollusk, but just in form, right? Just the abstract form is beautiful. Always want to keep that in mind. All right, so the bottom here, I want to go in and kind of do sluggish, snail-like texture a little bit. Start implying some of that, the primary stuff. So I'm starting to add in some primary skin detail, and I'm starting to lose the ability to do that in this area. Just don't have enough polys to hold it. Center line is going to be tricky if I'm going to keep this symmetrical. So I might want to consider breaking symmetry along the center line, but then what does that mean for my UVs? Do I double over my UVs? Do I have overlapping UVs? If I'm not going to double over my UVs and I'm just going to have each side be unique, asymmetry is no problem. If I'm going to try to double it over, in other words, have the left half sitting over the right half, asymmetry isn't going to matter. And I have to make it look good symmetrically. Step down. Control-Shift-X. Grow that out a little bit. So I'll save that secondary and tertiary skin detail for when I split off the head and have a little bit more geometry to play with here. I can also try to Z-remesh this again and just pull more geometry into the head using the color density feature. Polish that down a little bit. See how that reads from a distance. It's a little too consistent. I want to break it up a little bit. Let's go standard, take off lazy mouse, bring down the focal shift. That's starting to feel a little better. You know, and if something isn't feeling right in an area, you know, like don't just glaze over and go, oh, I'll get back to that later. Deal with the issue right then and there. you'll thank yourself later on for that. Because what ends up happening is if you do that over and over again, you end up with a sculpt that has a lot of areas that need work. And you look at that mountain of work and you just go, frickin' A, I'm just going to start a new project. It's just too much work for me to tackle. So it's sort of like, the clean as you go attitude that I mentioned before. Feel like an area is problematic. Solve it then and there. There's a point, too, where I'm like, okay, do I really need to have micro detail in this area? Is that enough to have in the normal map? Because I doubt that anyone's going to be standing like this on it, although, if I'm standing if we look at it from, once again, from the player perspective, what is that reading like? And that's sort of the litmus test. Like, what does it look like from the player's perspective? And that looks pretty chunky. I do want to add more density there. And these guys are so large. Let's go back. Turn on our back face masking. That I really want to make sure that they have some beautiful detail. So I feel like this is one of the more interesting parts of my character. I don't want to pass on the opportunity to make something spectacular here. I got one more here. All right, do a quick pass on the top of the head. All right, that's a good first pass. All right, and now let's start on this shift. I'll go ahead and do the rest of this off recording. I just want to kind of go through I don't know, this is about 75% of the way there, 80% of the way there. Still got some areas I need to work on here. So resolving this, and then doing a couple more detailed passes. But I can provide undo history on that if you guys want to see that while I do it. But let's move on to some newish territory. You know, before I do that, let me just take one more look. It's a little hidden from here by the feet, so. Yeah, I think that's going to provide a very nice backdrop for the ships. Man, that's disgusting. All right. Which I like.